Today we're going to be taking the top 5 Pool 2 decks and showing how you can upgrade these decks with just 1 or 2 cards from Pool 3. This one's going to be really fun, so stay tuned. Let's go. Hey, Milky here, back again with another one. Today we're going to be looking at those top 5 Pool 2 decks. So if you are in Pool 2, I'm going to have those top 5 decks for you ready to go. But if you are progressing into Pool 3 or you're in Pool 2 and interested what some Pool 3 upgrades, this is going to be a really good way to look at those Pool 2 decks, take the strongest decks that you have and upgrade them with cards in Pool 3. These decks can also be really relevant for people all the way into Pool 3. Often you're looking for new decks to play, things that maybe counter the meta or do well on the ladder. And these Pool 2 decks with some supplementary cards from Pool 3 can do really well in climbing to Infinite as well. Now, a big thing to note is that actually when you first enter Pool 3, you're probably going to be best served continuing on with your Pool 2 decks. And as you slowly and gradually unlock Pool 3 cards, those cards can help strengthen those Pool 2 decks. So it's really good in the early stages of Pool 3 to revisit your Pool 2 decks. Take a look at the cards you've been able to unlock so far in Pool 3 and see if they can be cards that you can sub into your Pool 2 decks to make them even stronger. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at these top 5 Pool 2 decks with easy upgrades from Pool 3 and some simple cards you can include to make them even better. Alright, so the first one to call out is the On Reveal deck. Now this one isn't necessarily a Pool 2 exclusive deck. It does have some Pool 2 cards in it, which I feel makes it a bit stronger, but On Reveal, as we know, is incredibly strong in Pool 1. Alright, so to break down exactly what you're looking at here, up the top you'll have the Pool 2 deck, and then below that we'll have the substitute cards, the Pool 3 cards that you can sub in for the Pool 2 cards, which we'll be taking out of the deck. So we've got the Pool 2 On Reveal deck right there. Some upgrades that I think can be really beneficial for this deck is removing Jessica Jones when you do unlock Wong. Wong is a huge card and a huge upgrade for On Reveal decks. If you have unlocked Wong, I'd highly recommend dropping him into the On Reveal deck. Even Wong by himself takes this deck to the next level. Think about all of the On Reveal effects you're going to be buffing and boosting across the board. White Tiger, for example, going off twice, immediate 15 power value from that card. If you've got Odin coming down on that again, you've got even more Tigers being spread across the board for a massive power push late in the game. He just works really well with this style of deck. You could potentially even use him with Gamora if your opponent's playing in there and you're able to guess that correctly for a massive Gamora buff. For the most part, Wong is an incredible enabler for on-reveal abilities, and he's just a great inclusion in this style of deck. Another change you could make to this deck with a Pool 3 card coming in is Infernaut replaced by Doom. Dr. Doom is a fantastic card, and if you do have Wong as well, there's an incredible amount of power you can spread to multiple locations with Dr. Doom. So with Wong, Dr. Doom represents 25 power across the board on a single turn 6, but even without Wong, he still represents 15 power from a 6 drop, which is absolutely massive. He's going to allow you to reach those unreachable locations, but also provide a very solid turn 6 in the cases where you don't want to play Odin or you haven't drawn Odin. If you are removing Infernaut from the deck for whatever reason, I'd consider also replacing Jubilee with Chavez. It's not something that you have to do if you do have Dr. Doom in that place, because Dr. Doom is still a great pull from Jubilee. But I think the consistency that Chavez provides for your early draws, as well as not having Infernaut in the deck for Jubilee to pull, might be just something to consider as well. Okay, so that's the Pool 2 On Reveal deck with the Pool 3 upgrade cards. I think Wong and Doom add so much to this deck. There's a lot of other cards that you could include in this, but I think for the most part, these are probably going to be your strongest 2 unlocks with On Reveal if you're looking at running that type of deck. Next up, we have the Dino Destroy deck, and there's obviously a few different types of Dino decks you can run. You can run ones with Infernaut, ones just are really focused around hand size, but I've found the Dino Destroy deck in Pool 2 to be the strongest version for me. So as you enter Pool 3, there's some cards which come out which really take this deck to the next level. If you can pull Taskmaster or even Arnim Zola, both of these are able to either copy or duplicate Devil Dinos on the board. That means you can have a massive power push if you've got a lot of cards in your hand on the late turns in the game, which is often really difficult to counter. There's also a sneaky one, which is Nick Fury, and Nick Fury for the most part isn't the greatest card, and I will say that for sure. But if you're playing Nick Fury on 5 and then you're playing Devil Dino on 6, or even the other way around, you can have your hand very full for Devil Dino, meaning that you're going to get a massive Devil Dino power push on the board because of the cards that you have in your hand. Now, I will admit that Nick Fury isn't the greatest card, but he is an incredibly fun one. He has great synergy with Devil Dino, number one, but he also allows you to pull into some really interesting cards. You could maybe get Galactus, you could maybe get Thanos, you could get other cards or 6-drops which will allow you to win the game. So he's definitely a high roll card, but definitely a fun one for sure. Some other changes that you could make to the Dino deck is actually subbing out Angela for Mystique. Mystique is a fantastic card in the game. In my opinion, she is the best card in the game, but that remains to be seen. But for me, Mystique copying a Devil Dinosaur only for 3 cost is a huge benefit that you can take advantage of with this deck. You've also got the option to play Quinjet in this deck, which is a pretty interesting one. Quinjet's got a unique ability which allows cards that didn't start in your deck to cost 1 less. You've got a couple of ways to get those, through Agent 13 or Cable, or potentially even Nick Fury if you are going to run that. It's just something to consider. He acts as like a mini Sarah for cards that didn't start in your deck. He can do quite well in certain circumstances for sure. Now, the big thing with Dino Destroy is the Destroy package complements the Dino part of the deck, or the hand size part of the deck as well. If you are replacing probably more than 2 cards in this deck, I would probably go ahead and cut the Destroy package in this deck and play more into the hand size part of the deck. I think if you are running, say, Taskmaster and Arnim Zola, or you're looking to run Arnim Zola and Mystique in this deck, then I'd probably go ahead and cut some of the Destroy cards and just pull in some other cards, potentially like White Queen as well. We all know Devil Dino is a pretty strong card, and the pool 3 cards here make that even stronger. The flexibility that the pool 3 cards in terms of the final turns of the game, particularly with Taskmaster and Arnim Zola on Dino locations, can be very strong and hard to counter for sure. Alright, so next up we have the pool 2 Spectrum ongoing deck, and I really like this deck because it is one of my favorite decks to play in pool 2. It's all around getting lots of ongoing cards out on the board, potentially locking down certain locations with Professor X, and then providing a really strong board-wide buff with Spectrum at the end of the game. Some very simple ways and easy ways to really take this deck to the next level when entering Pool 3, if you do have the card unlocks, is replacing Namor with Wong. Wong coming in at a 4 cost is a pretty straightforward replacement for Namor there, but he's going to allow Spectrum to just go off twice, which is a massive buff to the board. In this deck, there aren't any other targets for Wong. It's really going to be Wong, and then you play something strong on turn 5, and then you're going to be doing Spectrum late on in the game to provide a 4+ power to all of the ongoing cards you have out on the board, which is pretty massive in itself. Another fantastic combo piece with Wong is Mystique here. So if you do have Wong on turn 4, Mystique on turn 5 to double all of that, and then you also have Spectrum on turn 6, you're going to get +8 power to everything, or all the ongoing cards you have out on the board, which is a very difficult thing for your opponent to play around if they don't have direct counter cards for that combo. Now, another consideration you could do if you are bringing Wong into the deck is swapping out Claw for Cosmo. The reason I say that is because we do have a number of 5-drops already in the deck, so you just need to figure out how you're going to play out the final turns. In my personal opinion, I actually like keeping Claw in the deck because of the synergy with other cards in the deck, particularly like Professor X. It also allows you to play multiple locations on a single turn and add power to them, which is a pretty unique ability in this game. But if you are feeling like you need something extra or a counter card like Cosmo, he could be a great replacement for him as well. Now you'll notice we still have the Pool 2 Spectrum ongoing deck on the screen here, but with completely different upgrades cards. That's because depending on what you draw in Pool 2, there could be another incredible way to provide a completely new win condition to this deck and kind of transform the whole way it operates. So yes, this deck does still really revolve around Spectrum and ongoing cards and providing the buff there. But if you do unlock a particular card, which is Destroyer, you can provide a whole new secondary win condition for this deck. So if you do unlock Destroyer early in Pool 3, he's a versatile card. He'll fit in a couple of decks all by himself. You'll have access to the brand new Destroyer deck with all the Destroy cards and all of that going on. But then you'll also have access to this Spectrum ongoing Destroyer deck, which is rose to prominence and rose to a bit of fame most recently. If you do have Destroyer, I'd take out Claw and sub in Destroyer in his place. But then there's also a couple of other changes you'd want to make to this deck as well. Taking out Mr. Fantastic and bringing in Cosmo gives you the flexibility of playing Destroyer on the Cosmo location if you don't want his ability to go off, but also gives you the flexibility of playing around in terms of countering your opponent as well. Another change that you definitely want to make is Namor subbed out for Warpath. Warpath works incredibly well with Destroy decks because you're only playing 2 lanes for the most part. But yeah, this deck really rounds out quite well. I've been playing it a little bit lately and enjoying it a lot. The 2 win conditions is the thing that gets me. You've got this deck which disguises itself the whole game as a Spectrum ongoing deck for the most part, but then you can flip the win condition at the end with Destroyer, or you can do it vice versa. It just has some interesting counterplay and interplay with your opponents, and I think it's definitely one to try out for sure. Now we have the Pool 2 control deck, and in my personal opinion, this Pool 2 control deck is the strongest deck in Pool 2. I think Dino decks do really well, but this deck absolutely eats it alive for the most part. But there are some interesting ways you can upgrade this deck in Pool 3. Now, I will start by saying that this Pool 2 control deck in particular is much stronger in Pool 2. I think once you get to Pool 3 and you start to verse Pool 3 cards and Pool 3 decks, it does fall off a little bit. I think it still does very well, but it doesn't have the same level of oppression. Like, it feels very oppressive in Pool 2 when you verse this deck. Feels like you can't really do anything, but it's not quite the same in Pool 3. In saying that, though, there's some awesome Pool 3 cards which can be great additions to this deck for sure. I would think about subbing out Jubilee and potentially some of the top end of this deck if you're looking to provide a little bit more control. Juggernaut provides an awesome combo with Storm. Often you're running kind of like Storm and Jessica Jones as a bit of a combo, but Juggernaut is an awesome combo where you can play Storm, and if they're trying to ever win that Storm location, you can Juggernaut on that location if you've got the combo in hand and just push out those cards and potentially lock down that location very early in the game. Another tech choice you could bring in for countering ongoing cards is potentially bringing Rogue into the deck. Now, Enchantress will shut down all of the ongoing effects of the location, which in itself is very powerful. Rogue would actually steal one of the ongoing effects. So it's going to depend on what you think is more valuable in certain circumstances. Sometimes there's combos that only round out with one single ongoing card, which you can steal with Rogue and can be absolutely devastating for your opponent. You just probably need to think what you're trying to do and what you're versing currently at the moment before making that swap out Enchantress for Rogue. Another thing to consider is if you are pulling Jubilee out of this deck, you probably want to be rotating out some of the top end for some better Pool 3 cards if you can fit them in. Some good subs you can make is Infinite and Hulk, that top end that you'd be wanting to pull ideally with Jubilee. You could swap them out for things like Daredevil, which works incredibly well with Professor X. You could also potentially look to swap out for Magneto, which is an awesome disruption card that you can drop late on in the game. Especially with Warrior Falls at the moment, there's some interesting interplay there. But Magneto's a really strong card, which is very hard to counter for the most part. And finally, Arrow. Everyone's loving Arrow at the moment, and I can see why. She's incredibly strong. This deck is around controlling your opponent, and the disruption that she provides is really unprecedented. No one kind of does what she does for the most part, and on a single turn, you can completely swing the game. So there's a few options there you can kind of build around and potentially look to include in this control style deck. The last one that we have up today is this Pool 2 Zoo deck, and this for me was the Mountain Climber. It was the deck that I used to climb to Infinite on a number of different occasions, and it's been something that I found continually consistent even in Pool 3. The Pool 3 upgrades take this deck really to the next level. Now, I've done a recent video where I look at the Ultron Zoo deck, which I think is an incredibly strong deck for consistency, but also climbing the ladder, and the Pool 3 version of this does really well. I'd swap out... In that case, I'd probably swap out Angela for Zero. Zero works great with Ebony Maw and just provides you freedom at that location. You're not going to need it every game, but there's some synergy there which can definitely benefit you. Also, it's a bit of a power upgrade as well above some of the other 1-drops that are in the deck. Now, you could also look out subbing out Armor for Wave, and there's a lot of people that think you absolutely need to run Armor in Zoo-style decks, and I can see why coming out of Pool 2 because of the Killmongers that were just decimating Zoo decks in Pool 2. But the interesting thing with this deck, and I think the powerful thing, is that you're able to fully replenish your board with 1-drops on turn 6 with Ultron if you can time it correctly, and just make sure that you're able to hand over initiative on those final turns. It can be a massive play. I'm on the side that you actually don't need armor in this deck, so I would sub out armor in place of Wave and bring Wave into the deck. And Wave is a great way to pull out the high roll of Onslaught early on. Getting out Onslaught early on in the game just gives you a little bit more flexibility with the final turns. Sometimes you're going to have the perfect curve of Khazar into Blue Marvel, into Onslaught, or into Ultron, but sometimes you're not. And if you only have Ultron out there and one buff card, it just gives you a bit of flexibility, especially with having that Ultron on turn 6. So that brings us to our final replacement, which would be the reason to build around this deck, which is Ultron for Captain America. If you do unlock Ultron in this game, definitely try him out in this Zoo style deck. Even if you don't have the other cards to sub out, Ultron himself replacing Captain America can bring a completely new win condition to this deck, something that's really hard to counter on the final turn of the game unless they're just holding back a Killmonger, which often they don't do. Often players see a full board of 1-drops, which you're most likely going to be having earlier in the game. They slam Killmonger, they think the game's over, they snap you. But if you've got Ultron in hand and some of your buff cards ready to go, sometimes it's an easy snapback because you can fill out the board really quickly and provide some very strong power across the final turns of the game. So this one's a really fun one as well. As I said, I've done a recent video on this deck and it was quite successful for sure. So check that one out. I'll link it up here as well. All right, so that's it. The top 5 Pool 2 decks and some cards that you can unlock in Pool 3, which you can sub into those decks, which you can upgrade those decks, take them to the next level and make them even stronger. Look, there's so many cards in Pool 3 and I've probably missed lots of combo pieces here, but I wanted to call out these ones that I've found specifically work very well in my experience, but also that I think are definitely value adds to the decks from Pool 2. Let me know in the comments how you're building decks in Pool 3, if you're taking those Pool 2 decks and upgrading them, or if you're trying to build completely new decks. We'd love to hear from people for sure. All right, with that being said, thanks again so much for watching. Really appreciate you hanging out. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that good stuff. Until the next one, I'll see you then.